Let's see here. So, yeah, so, you know, when you structure your business plan, you want to do plan A and plan B. I just think it looks a lot more organized if you're talking to a potential investor and saying, listen, I've thought out the whole thing. I'd love for this to happen, but if it doesn't, here's what we're prepared to do. This is a distribution plan. This is how long it's going to take, and this is how you'll be paid back. All right. Any other questions on business plans before we move on, or sales projections? Yes?
I'm not quite sure where the divide is between some of the things you said between finished films and published films. You talk about finding investors. Clearly that's definitely
Right.
You also talking about approaching gravitas or whatever. Presumably that's finished.
Approaching who?
Someone like gravitas.
Gravitas, yes.
Finished.
That would be a completed film, correct. Yes, although what I did say was that, let's say you are in the process of putting together a business plan for a film, and you're at a festival or a market, and you meet somebody from Gravitas, you could definitely say, oh, wow, this is the movie I'm making. I'd love to talk to you about it when I'm done. What are typical revenues right now that you're seeing with some of the films that are similar to this? So that would be a way to sort of get that type of intelligence. Or talk to other filmmakers who have distributed with them. So like, for example, these filmmakers, Kim and JT, who did Angel's Perch, they put themselves out there on a podcast with me. They always get a ton of questions from other members of my community who say, hey, how much have you made so far? And they've been really free with their information to try to help other people get some intelligence so they can do their business plans. Yes?
If you took a film's revenue as 100%, have you got a way to split the revenue into theatrical, VOD, television? What percentage would land up in each of those revenue streams?
So like for a completed movie?
Yeah.
Well, it's different in every market, but in the US right now, typically most everything is coming from the digital space, still a little bit of home entertainment. Very few, films that get picked up by the big distributors at Sundance, they're making a lot of money out of theatrical, but that's like 10, 20 films a year. Everybody else is making the bulk of their revenue, typically from digital and home entertainment. The TV landscape is not very kind to independents in the US right now. It's really programming like studio films. So everything has moved on to, within digital, by the way, there is a stream called cable VOD. So in the US you can watch VOD on the laptop and you can watch it on cable. And when you buy it on cable, it's can be $4.99 or $5.99. That's actually a big revenue stream for the films that are able to get onto the cable VOD. Do you have something similar here? Like pay-per-view? Yeah. So that's the biggest piece of the digital pie is on cable VOD, if you can get it. Otherwise, it's the internet VODs.
So if you had 100%, could you say 90% is on VOD and 10% is theatrical?
Or maybe 70-30 in general with,
So 70s goes to VOD and 30% split between theatrical and television?
Yeah, for most films, unless it's one of these films that would get picked up at a Sundance, then it's just a different kind of deal.
For the rest of the world, would you say it's the same?
Well, the rest of the world, so like I know in the European market, there's still a lot of TV. You can still get independent films on television, and then digital is a lot smaller, so maybe it's 30 digital, 30 TV, maybe those two are split. And then DVD is still really big in a lot of the European territories. I know home entertainment is still a big market in Australia, is that right? So, and digital's not as big. So it kind of depends on the territory, but in general, in North America, digital has just taken over sort of, I would say, almost 70% probably of that pie, whereas in Europe, it's split more, 30, 30, 30 with a little bit of margin there.
Really, that 70 is
Mm-hmm.
they'll take the VOD and any ancillary, and the probability of getting overs is quite slim.
Quite slim, yeah.
In that scenario, you sort of
You flip it, yep. Exactly. What else? Business plans, any other questions on that before we move on? I'm gonna have another video clip, yep.
So what you're suggesting from those figures is the theatrical release is actually like a loss leader, or it's a marketing tool, it's not a revenue stream in itself.
Right.
So that's an important part of your marketing.
Yeah, so it can be. So usually, the way in the U.S. at least, the people who are, let's say you're doing a tug release, typically people are making maybe, most people are breaking even. Okay, so loss leader, break even. Some people are making maybe 30,000, 50,000, 70,000, something like that, from 3 to 6 months release. So these Angel Perch filmmakers that I told you about, I think their final tally was they were up maybe 30 to 50 grand. They were out there for 6 months. It was really a lot of work. And they said, of that 30 to 50, half of that, at least half of it, was merchandise sales that they sold at the screenings themselves. So they sold T-shirts and hats. They were up, yeah. So that was their.
They would be moving around the country,
Exactly, yeah. It was 6 months of their life.
feeding themselves,
That's right.
so that would have got cut off.
No. That was net. That was net after all that, yeah. But they're not putting a value on their time. You know, it was still 6 months of their life. But this was what they wanted to do. So for them, that was their choice. But that's more of an outlier. Most people that I hear from through my community are really happy that they're breaking even, and then using that as an opportunity to hopefully drive digital sales. It all comes back to just driving the digital sales. And if they can make 30 grand, 50 grand, or 10 grand even on a profit, they're happy. But like I said, a lot of times that you have to remember it's not only ticket sales, but it's merchandise sales.
These Alzheimer kids, was that their first film?
Yes, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna roll another clip here.
Where do we go?
So this is the world of film business.
All these people are here doing what? Selling films they have?
Or trying to find a film to grab, to set up, to become a partner in, to get a distributor for. I mean, this is like the Diamond Center on 47th Street.
Yeah.
You lost weight.
I wish.
Well, I might, no, you look, all right, gained, so by relatively, this is Alec.
Of course. How are you? Come in, come in. I don't like the Cannes Film Festival. I don't believe in the Cannes Film the festival. There's two things. The market, which I've been here all the time in the festival. Most of the movie in the festival are movie that if the only person will go is their mothers and cousins. That's all.
I am coming off the TV show 6 years. Next year I have a half season, 7 years, then we're done. And I'm going to, I don't like to say this in like some lofty way, but I'm going to re-enter filmmaking as a career. Do you think you could be in the movie business with me again?
Definitely, but not by yourself. I will have to support
You
you.
lay it on the card, definitely.
Listen,
There's got to be a woman.
that's what they know me about. I tell people you need to get support with other movie star people around you, like Jerry Butler supported with another 4 and what's his name? And
So you want my-
today world very difficult or nearly impossible. One man to make the movie on his own name.
What do you think about Bejo if it was Bejo and I together in a film?
Who is
Baroness
Bejo?
Bejo.
I don't know.
You can't raise a lot of money with her? She was in The Artist.
I know.
They
No,
won the Oscar for last
I
year.
don't care.
She's gorgeous.
She's gorgeous. So
She's
it's
heart-stopping.
She's
She's it.
beautiful, but she's not a girl I can sell on her.
Anybody heard of Avi Lerner? Okay. So check out his company too when you get a chance. He is Avi Lerner is famous for never reading a script. He says it's not his job. So, and as you can see from this clip, he basically, what I found really funny about this movie is basically everybody who they went to talk to, they basically said right to Alec Baldwin's face, "You're worth nothing." I mean, and so by the end, he was going up to people saying, "Will you give me 50 cents? Am I worth $1.50? Like what?" So, you know, I don't play this to depress you. I want to bring some levity to the topic of, you know, this is how the business works. Who's been to Cannes before? Okay, so a lot of people. Is anybody going this year? In a couple of months? So, and as anyone knows, the first time you walk into the Cannes Film Market, they said it's like the Diamond Center on 47th Street. I remember my first day working at Cannes as a sales agent, I thought it was like just this awakening of, wow, it was just widgets. You know, people are selling widgets. But anyway, vetting the marketplace. So that's what James Toback and Alec Baldwin were doing, was they went to Cannes to sort of vet the marketplace for their film, and what they found out was, you know, with the cast they were proposing, they could only support the $4 to $5 million budget. So what are some of the advantages of you vetting the marketplace? And for those of you going to Cannes, it's a perfect opportunity to do that, only because you're in the thick of it. You have an opportunity to talk to people face to face and to invest in those relationships that you want to be able to go back to people over and over again every time you're making a film and say, hey, remember we met at Cannes, and so I'm making this film now, this type, with these people, what do you think? And to try to start getting an idea, we talk about reverse engineering, just checking in with the market first before you start to back into the budget, back into the elements you need, so on and so forth. So why would you vet the marketplace? So that you don't end up in this situation that we've talked about where you spend $2 million on a completed film and there's no market for it. The numbers don't support it, the talent you cast didn't support it, the genre isn't one that can spread, there's no word of mouth, nothing. So I don't want any of you to be in that position. So why would you vet the marketplace? To avoid that problem. How do you vet the marketplace? I think the best way to do that, like I said, is by going to one of the film markets or festivals, or certainly they are very generous here with you guys. People come through to speak. There's your own festivals and conferences. Do whatever you have to do to get in front of people and talk about your projects. And also look at what other people are doing in the market. So I mentioned IndieWire. You guys know about IndieWire, obviously. And here's another tip. If you aren't at the film markets, you should be reading the trades, the dailies. Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety, and Screen International print daily free PDFs every day of a major market, and you should download those, read about the films that are being bought and sold, for how much, who's in it, all that stuff. I have entire spreadsheets of notes that I put together after every major market so that I can constantly keep track of all of these details. And that's one way of vetting the marketplace without talking to people in person, realizing that you're not going to be able to go to every single market and festival out there. And, you know, what if you don't? What are the consequences if you don't start talking to the marketplace and reverse engineering and all that? I think the consequences, you know, the worst scenario that, like I said, when I was a sales agent myself, that I used to hate to have to tell people, my clients, was, you know, I'm sorry you made this film for X amount, but this is all we could sell it for. And it was all because they had just steamrolled the process without any consideration for what the marketplace would pay, what types of elements meant anything, or any of that. And so if there's one message that I want to get to you guys today about that, it's, you know, this idea of distribution in reverse, looking at the marketplace first, talking to the marketplace, and then backing into your project from there. What other questions? I have some action items I'll take you through in a minute, but I want to if anybody wants to workshop their project, if you are feeling like, hey, this is what I've got, what should I do? We can run through a couple of those. Yep. Sorry?
In regards to pre-existing IP and things, what sort of level, if you've got, you're based in your film or your idea on something which already exists and already has a bit of an audience, what sort of threshold of an audience would be there for that to be more of an attraction for sales? Or, if it's
Okay.
something that's direct, to say, this book has already sold 50,000 copies or whatever, if it's something more obscure, like take it back, that example, that battleship film being based off the game.
Right, that actually brings up a really good point. So one of the ways, we talked about adding elements to your project to make it more marketable. One of the things that actually can help a project be more marketable is if it's based on existing IP. And obviously, there's a big difference between it's based on this best-selling book and it's based on this little book. But I think if you can, so as part of your business plan or your pitch deck or whatever, if you're talking to somebody about it, I think if you can prove that there's some type of existing audience within this, and here's your plan to exploit that within your distribution scenario or whatever, I think that's a huge help. It's so funny because I have found that, in all of the films I've been pitching over the last couple of years, the minute you say, oh, it's based on this or it's based on this book, people's eyebrows go up. And they may have never heard of it, but the fact that it's based on something else, there's an immediate presupposition that there's some type of existing audience for it. So I think that actually adds value to it. But then it's your job, of course, to then connect the dots and say, but here's how we're going to exploit that. If that helps.
We had a massive amount of the low budget indie pictures are right, directed, material, created by themselves, aren't they?
Original.
It's not they take Romeo and Juliet and then return it into a story on the west side of Chicago. I mean, they do. But by and large, it's people talking.
Yeah. Yes.
I read a book 6 months ago, I think it was the last update, it was around 2012. There were some revenue projections in there for video on demand, and what I remember, what I took away was maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 is realistic for an independent film release through those channels. 2015, are those figures still the same, or has it gone up, has it gone down?
It's about the same. What's changed since 2012, and that's the frustrating thing about writing books, is that by the time it's published, a lot of these things like sales projection tables could be outdated. But the one thing that's changed since then is that there's more of an opportunity to put it into theaters yourself. So Tug didn't exist back then, and the VOD companies that will put it into theaters for you didn't exist back then. So I think if you are one of the titles that can break out beyond the loss leader, I think there is a chance to make a little bit more money than that within the theatrical landscape. It's still tough because it's expensive to do that, but that probably is the one thing that's changed since then. Other than that, a lot of the projections are the same. The VOD numbers may have gone up by about 30 to 50% since then. They're kind of growing at that clip every year and sort of accelerated now. But other than that, the other columns and stuff would probably be the same.
What's the time frame on that VOD? Like, is it a 12-month window really, and then you're kind of like
Yeah.
really out of the game unless it's got a real world word of mouth thing going?
Yeah, so probably about 12 months. And then what some people are doing is at the, maybe at the 12-month mark, they'll give it another push, they'll re-release it. Another thing people will do to elongate that window is they'll keep running it in festivals, sometimes even smaller festivals throughout that VOD period, so it's just a constant promotional machine. And then I had one client who, literally did festivals for a year, and then was like, okay, we want to extend the VOD, so now we're just going to put it in some theaters. So they just kept going. So, and they figured out a system to minimize their costs in the theater. So, but normally it's about 12 months, and the only way to extend that would be to re-release it, keep putting it in theaters, keep going on tour and all that stuff. But by that point, a lot of people just want to move on, quite frankly, to the next film. But yeah, 12 months. Now, in terms of timeline for revenue, though, like in your business plans, you're usually not going to get your first VOD check until 6 months after it first appears. So that's the one thing to think about, is there is a lag in when the money actually comes back to you, because a lot of these companies account on a quarterly basis, and then they don't. So the quarter ends, and then they have 30 days, and then it goes to the aggregator, and then it goes to you. So a lot of times I'll call up my members and say, oh, what did you get your first check? Because we actually have a thread in my forums on Film Specific where people report what the VOD earnings are. So we have a place to keep track of what people are making. And what we're finding is it takes usually about 6 months for people to get their first check, or sometimes they'll get their first one after 3 months, but it only represents a small piece. So just something to keep in mind when you're putting together your business plans or talking to potential investors, that remember that revenue actually takes 12 to 18 months to actually start really cash flowing back in any meaningful way. Yes. Oh, 10 minutes. All right. Any last questions? And then I'm going to go over some action steps. Yep.
Have you got any comments about different revenue projections for different genres? Because, when we're talking about small budget films here,
Yeah.
so like horror films are sort of a well-worn path for independent filmmakers. Is that sort of still holding true? Or?
Actually, what I'm hearing about horror films, and I just kind of heard this firsthand at EFM as I was out talking to sales companies. They said that horror is finally, at least I talked to a lot of North American sales companies, and they said, look, it's just saturated low-budget horror right now. And this is a funny story. I had a client who went to AFM, and she was pitching her low-budget horror, and they said she got turned down by a lot of people. They said, oh, no, we don't want horror. So then I said, well, why don't you reposition it as a psychological thriller? Because it kind of was that anyway. And so she switched it up, repositioned it, pitched it again at EFM, and got like 15 script requests. So that's something to think about in the low-budget horror range. But in general, what I tell people, if you're looking at a sales projection chart, the higher end is usually the medium to high projections are usually going to be for your thrillers, action, sci-fi, so the more genre type films, and the dramas and comedies and art house are going to be more on the low side of things, conservatively, generally speaking. So all things being equal, usually an action film or a thriller, very well done, of course, sci-fi can command a bit higher prices, only because they're more commercially driven, whereas the dramas and the comedies will not get as high of prices. All right, so let's wrap this up. I wouldn't want to leave you without a few specific actions to take. Take another pass at your budget. I'm always telling filmmakers this. Pretty much every day that I talk to either writers and directors that I'm working with on films that I'm executive producing or consulting clients, take another pass at that budget. Figure out how to bring it down. Talk to your line producer. And maybe you have a plan A and a plan B budget. Maybe your ideal budget was a $5 million, and I'm saying get it down to $2 million. And you're saying, well, I can't. Well, then maybe you need to go into your script and readjust things for the marketplace. It's all part of the reverse engineering process. So wherever you're at, if you are falling into the dead zone, or if you feel like this budget is too high, take another pass at it, and it can help to work with a professional line producer who knows what they're doing on that front. Another action, vet your project in the marketplace prior to making it, either by going to a film market, a festival, or talking to actual people in the market about your project. You know, put together a pitch deck or a business plan and say, look, this is what I've got, this is the genre, this is the budget range, this is who I'm thinking. Am I in the right ballpark? And like that client I told you who went to AFM, and he went from a 7 million down to 2 million because everybody pretty much told him, listen, make it for this, with this level of talent, and we can come in and help you. Third action step, build a team that has a track record around you. I'm always surprised by people who try to take all this stuff on alone. One of the first things you can do to start building value in your project is by building out a team of people who have a track record, who have more credibility than you do. That's going to help you attract the higher level talent. It's going to help you when you're pitching investors. So, you know, don't try to do this alone, especially if you are one of the newer producers or newer writer-directors. Build out a team of capable, credible people with a track record. Another thing, put together a realistic finance and business plan using some of the things we talked about today. So forget the pie in the sky projections. Don't just look at the high, and don't count every single territory. Be more conservative with that. And in your finance plans, think about, you know, we talked about making a portion of your budget as an equity piece. Where else can you look outside of Australia? Use platforms like Slated, cross-reference on IMDb Pro, and really use some of these other markets. I'm talking to investors in Europe, in the UK, in the US. Like I said, I met that Australian investor at Berlin. So think outside of the box, and the platforms exist now to where you can access people who are looking to get involved in films. The right types of movies. And, you know, last but not least, raise money responsibly. I've been saying this for a long time, probably since I started even writing my first book back in 2007. It was one of my big themes, is that just be ethical. You know, and I guess it's probably because I came up through sales of like, you don't want, if you're out there raising money, be honest with people about what you think you can bring back from the market. Show them you've done your research, in what type of timeline, and be realistic about both what you can get from the market and therefore what you can make your film for. So with that said, do we have time for any questions, or are we done?
We've got 2 minutes.
We got 2 minutes.
Another event coming straight in.
So we're going to have to cruise. Any last minute questions? I do have one announcement. I am giving a workshop in Sydney on Saturday. I have like 2 spots left. So if anybody is interested, you can go to strategicintensives.com or talk to me. Also, you should sign up for my newsletter at filmspecific.com and send me an email and say hi. If you have any follow-up questions from anything we talked about today, just reach out to me through my website, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions for you guys. So thank you for having me.